Welcome to our next session. This session is entitled Killing Cows, How the Pandemic Can Bring Fresh Vision. And this is our next session for PYLA, the Pennsylvania Youth Leaders Association, and we're so glad that you're here watching. I'm joined in this session by two of my friends. We have David White. He's the Youth Director of California and Nevada, the Church of God in California and Nevada. And then we have Justin Sharpe, and he is the State Youth and Discipleship Director for South Georgia. And it is my privilege to have both of these gentlemen on this session with us. And so the whole idea behind this session is discussing, the reason we called it Killing Cows, is that we're really addressing the whole idea of sacred cows. And those are those things that we have in our ministries, in our churches, that we wish that we could change, that sometimes need to be changed, but because of whatever reason, we're not able to change those. Sometimes it's due to tradition. Sometimes it may be the equivalent of that there's a piano that's on your church stage that you're not allowed to miss because, or you're not allowed to remove from the stage simply because somebody might have donated that to the church. So it has that plaque on there, and you can never get rid of that organ. Even though nobody ever plays that organ, you can't get rid of it because somebody donated it. Those are sacred cows that we're talking about. And in youth and children's ministries, it may be, it could be any list of things. Maybe it's the schedule that you keep for each service in your ministry, that it's always been done that way before, so that's why we keep it. Maybe it's the type of music, but the whole idea of this session is to really discuss how that this pandemic quite possibly may have created a situation where you can relaunch, maybe rebrand, or even recreate something in your ministry. And so I want to start out asking, we'll start off with David. What are some areas that youth and children's leaders, in your opinion, that they might be able to revamp or relaunch in their ministries?
That's a great question. First of all, I heard there'd be food. I heard kill cows. I assumed there's a barbecue or something. That's how we roll in California. I thought there'd be some carne asada or something, but no, that is a great question. That's the beauty of being able to revamp and rebrand. If there's one thing that we've learned in the past half year of this COVID-19 pandemic, is all the rules are out the door. I mean, we are at unprecedented times. I know in 1918 we went through this, but that's nothing like what we're going through with now. So our youth leaders and youth pastors have been forced to get very adaptive, very creative. And to me, it's an incredible opportunity. I think once we got done griping and complaining because we couldn't be in a building or we couldn't gather, or we had to socially distance, we can do that all day till the sun go down. At some point, we need a solution, and this generation needs to see us have a solution. So it's a great opportunity for us to say, listen, whatever was working, whatever wasn't working, none of that matters right now. We've got to find a way to give Jesus to our students at a time when their mental health, their spiritual health might be at an all-time low from all the effects of having things shut down on them. So it allows you to do things that you, like you said, Josh, you couldn't do normally. I know as a pastor, I let my youth pastor know, listen, I don't care what works. Figure out what works that you can connect with our students. And so we went online for a while. It was strictly online with youth ministry. We found ways to do things with Zoom. We found ways to do things with Instagram Live. But we were able to completely redo what ministry is. And I think that's important right now, because if we're really honest with ourselves, we can blame COVID-19 for everything. I think all COVID-19 really has done, as far as ministry in general, is it just exposed what really hadn't been working in a long time anyway, but we just didn't want to own it. So we'll blame COVID-19. We'll blame everything on that. But we got to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. Because statistically, whatever it is most of us was doing to reach youth in America, it hasn't been working in a very long time. You know, the millennials were the least reached generation in American church history. And now Generation Z is like, they're making a run at that record. Like they told the millennials, here, hold my root beer. You know, we're going to crush your record. So the traditional format of them come to us, them sit in our room, wait for them to come in our doors, and we'll give them Jesus. That format, as far as a form of youth evangelism, really overall has not been working in America, whether Pennsylvania, South Georgia, certainly California, out here with all the heathen. It hasn't been working. So it's an opportunity. Okay, well, let's figure out what does reach kids. Let's look at things in the work. What is working with youth? What are youth drawn to? What formats get them excited? And let's completely redo how we do ministry. So for us, a lot of that was Instagram live stuff, short hits. Instead of an hour, 15 minutes in a room, we can't get a room with them. So we learned how to give them more bite-sized stuff, quick hits, stuff that matches their attention span. And also, we also gone off campus because the government regulations really control the on campus. So we were able to do some things off campus and reach kids who have zero interest of coming to our church building. So those are some things that rebranding allows you to do. It gets you creative, and it lets you solve problems that you didn't even know were problems before.
I think that's good. Justin, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, first off, thank you, Josh, for having me on this, along with David. Obviously, he hit so much. You could go into so many details about it. What I personally feel is that the church is just, we've developed our ways, we've developed our routines, we've fallen into certain structures, certain categories, if you will, that we just follow, especially in youth ministry and in kids ministry. We do exactly what essentially, I hate to say it like this, what we grew up on, or what we saw work for us. And it's just, we have seen that no longer works in youth ministry. If we were there before, like David said, we probably are exposed now because that format just no longer works, in my opinion, in youth ministry and kids ministry. So I think we have to relook at those things. We have to revisit them, but it is, like David said, exposing all those things. So, now is the perfect time to look at your ministries to say, hey, what was working, what is working, and what are the methods, as David spoke about too, that are going to reach this generation, because otherwise we're going to miss them. We are seeing more and more, David touched on this as well, but we're seeing more and more millennials leaving the church, and they already have, and especially now since COVID has hit, the numbers are staggering. What we did have as a church with millennials, they're now gone. 50% of all the millennials that were here are gone out the door. And so you ask yourself, where are the Gen Z or kids coming from? A lot of those are millennial parents that are having those Gen Zers, and the young ones are there. And so we're losing them. So we have to embrace, what are the things we can look at and change? How do we embrace, I hate to say this, but how do we embrace culture, what these kids are used to actually reach them with the gospel? Because, I'm a firm believer, just like David said, we can't expect them to come into our churches. We can't expect to throw, one more pizza party and expect them to show up and feel like that's going to be enough. We've got to take this time. We've got to take this opportunity to revamp what we've always done, how we feel like it's always done. And, I just want to stretch it even further than that, if I can, and just say, it's not about us. We can't say what would work for us. It's about, what are these kids dealing with? There's so many new emotions, so many new mental things that have happened during COVID. So who they are as people, they've been forced to kind of grow up, if you will, going through things they've never experienced before. And even our generations didn't even experience, they're seeing these things head on. And so they've got new mindsets, and so we've got to understand how to reach them that way. So.
One of the things that I appreciate about Justin, and you may not know this, but Justin is one of the most creative-minded people in our movement. I love watching the graphics. He makes me so jealous when I see what he puts out in advertising and, and promoting events. And I'm not even going to tell you where to find his stuff, because when you go to look there, you're going to expect that from me, and I can't keep up with him. But what are some tools, Justin, that leaders can use to bring their delivery up to another level?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. Let me say it like this. Be you. There's so much of this, and this is just me speaking from, I appreciate you, recognizing my, creative side, but I have seen this during the COVID, that there are those that have zero presence online, if you will. And so they struggle when they try to go do a live, anything live they struggle with. So, I think it's okay to be you, if you're not somebody that does well on live things, if you're not somebody that does well with recording things, utilize the people around you. Find those people that are in your workspace that can help you with that stuff. It may be students that you get in to lead certain things that maybe you felt like you had to have your hands in. Maybe it's the stretching out of that you have to find and be creative with. At the end of the day, as much as we all want to see ourselves on videos, on live feeds, we want to, get hope and pray that kids are, buying into our stuff. They're not. They just simply aren't. It's they connect with each other. They're looking for their friends. They're looking for their peers. So I just really, want to say maybe it's the fact that we are challenging them to lead each other. How can we be creative with that? As far as that, if you are looking to enhance your own personal stuff, get out there and see what everybody else is doing. I'm not saying you have to rip it off and do what everybody else is doing, but there are churches that have been doing the live stuff for much longer than COVID, than much longer than, thrown into this whole mess. See what they've done. Find the resources that are out there. Do some Google researches, get on YouTube, find some of this stuff, and find things that maybe would work for your guys. I'm a firm believer that every ministry is unique. Every ministry is different. So what works for you may not work for me. So I just really encourage you to find those things that will work for you. Find the kids that can jump in and fill the spaces maybe that you can't personally, and run with it. Let it be a thing where and I'm not afraid to ask God for help. In the time of need, I am one to say, God, give me the creative flow. Give me the creative mindset of, what can we do that is so different, God, that will reach these kids? That's the way I approach things, and now we going back to that first question, now is the perfect time to ask ourselves, is the stuff we've been doing for years now working? And is it okay to let it go? That's what we're talking about today. Is it okay to let this stuff die? And is it okay to move our ministry into a different place that maybe we've never been in?
Well, I think that that's good. And I think that we have to do the research. We have to study and find those things that work. For instance, for those that may not realize this, if you're going to utilize social media, which I highly encourage you to use social media, you need to find what are the optimum times. When are the best times to post on each platform? Because each platform is different. You post at a different time on Facebook than you do on Insta. You post on Twitter at a different time. There are analytics that are involved, and it's not difficult to find that stuff. All you have to do is Google it, and they'll tell you when the best times to post those things are. And some of that you may need to lean on some of your leaders. Some of us are just not built to, we're not wired in that way. One of the things that I love about David is David is very relational, and I appreciate the way that he's able to connect with those in his church and those in student ministry there in California and Nevada, and so the way that we connect relationally has changed as well. It's more than just knowing when to post, but it's knowing what to post. And so I'm going to throw a curveball at you, David. What might be some ways that leaders can connect relationally if they're not able to meet face to face?
Well, that's been the challenge. And I know church youth groups and churches in general, we struggled back in March doing this just as much as our schools did. Because we've been online at my local church where I pastor since even before I got here, I think since 2004. But when it became the only way to communicate, one of the things that we figured out really quick was Zoom, as great as that technology might seem, Zoom just didn't work for our students because they were Zooming all day at school for 8 hours of Zoom and then more screen time doing all the homework. And then we tried to get them on Zoom for a youth group, and it was just a tire fire of a disaster. We couldn't keep their attention. We couldn't get a point across. So what we had to learn how to do, because the biggest thing our students was missing in their lives personally, it was that social connection. They missed that. I mean, it was devastating to their psyche to lose all social connection outside of their home, at least in the early stages of the pandemic. So a decision that we made with our youth group here in Central California was, okay, and again, this goes back to killing the cows, okay? When I became a youth pastor, they basically gave me a King James Bible and a flannel board and 5 teenagers who didn't want to be there and stuck me in a room for an hour. It said, just talk for an hour, okay, till they tapped out. That's the system that I grew up in. Bless God, it worked, right? It was good enough for Paul and Silas. It was good enough for us. With these kids, that does not work. They don't need another lecture. So this is what I told my youth pastors. She broke her jaw on the tile flooring. I said, here's what we're going to do. On youth group night, we're going to go online. We're going to go on Zoom. You're not going to teach the Bible. Bam. Dude, I just lost my credentials. Like Bishop Cooper just got like 8 letters right now from your pastors. Who is this guy from California? They need to have an earthquake and fall into the ocean, okay? They need the word of God, but they need a social connection as well. And we learned really quick, it was impossible to do both effectively. So I told my youth pastor, here's what we're going to do. We're going to videotape you. We'll have some student leaders share. I'll share sometimes. We're going to pre-record the word, and we're going to feed that to our kids on Instagram Live, which is code for keep it under 60 minutes. You know what I'm saying? And so we're going to make sure the kids get in there. We'll have a system where they like it. They check in, something. We know they're getting the word. But when we gather on Zoom together, this is strictly a social and mental health connection. You're just going to talk to them. How was your day? What's going on? Tell me 10 new ways you've learned that COVID-19 is evil and from Satan and the pit of hell. And what I found was with the kids, again, we changed the delivery system. We changed how we communicate the gospel to, okay, we're going to get you the gospel devotional style every week, but we care about you. We want to connect with you personally. And I'm willing to connect with you, even if I don't have a Bible lesson and a 3-point story attached to it every single time. And I love what Justin said. It was no longer about us, the deliverer of this incredible message. This is strictly and purely about you and your well-being and how are you doing, and just let you see other faces and let you connect with each other in the chaos of Zoom. So that's one example that I would give that's really worked for us.
I like that.
Don't tell your pastor I said not to teach the Bible. I got my own problems.
Listen, I'm a proponent of that. As I was when I youth pastored, we had one evening a month that we didn't even. It was a fellowship night, just a hangout night, and we didn't even crack open the Bible. That was, for us, that was our entry level for our students to invite their friends. They didn't have to worry if sister so-and-so was going to be shouting her bobby pins out and scaring them out of the church. That's certainly who we are. That's in our DNA. But sometimes that would scare off our friends. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times when I was growing up that I didn't want my friends to come to church with me on Sunday mornings because I didn't know how to explain what was happening. And so I think it's important to have that entry level introduction to our ministry at times where you may not even open up the word. But if we've done our job right with our students, they should be able to see the word living in them. My son-in-law, and it really hurts me to say that, is a youth pastor and in Florida, and something that he came up with just during this pandemic, he was really struggling with his students coming online and he was having trouble engaging them. So they decided to have a game night where they would have games via the internet. But instead of just expecting them to show up and to play these games, they created little baskets with all of the elements that they would need to play the games that night. And they sanitized them, they cleaned them, they put them in plastic, and they went around to every student's home. They actually physically drove to each of their homes and did a drop and left it there, and then texted them and said, hey, listen, we left something for you on your front porch. We want you to be there tonight with that basket. And so not only did they feel loved, but then they also felt obligated to come because someone took the time to make those packages up for them. And then whichever house won the games for that night, he already had their addresses. He had a pizza delivered to their house that night. So that's just a very inexpensive way, but it forces your students to get engaged. Are you going to have 100% participation? Probably not. But anything better than the week before is a step in the right direction. Let me ask you guys this, Justin. We've got an entire session that is dedicated to this later on today, but I would like to ask you, where do you see youth and children's ministry in 5 years? What do you see it looking like?
That is first off, it's a tough question, but it's a scary question to ask. And let me just take it back to this. One of the things that really challenged me when I was a youth minister in youth ministry, and trying to look at how we approached our kids and how we did certain things, is I was speaking with somebody who was a non-Christian, wasn't used to the church. They're actually from Brazil, and we were having a conversation, and he was asking me what I did, and I was just explaining to him I'm a youth pastor, and it just blew his mind, and he could not grasp the fact that I was getting paid by a church to minister to youth. He just couldn't understand that the culture there in Brazil is they all kind of come together. They're all, the church he was around, though he wasn't a Christian, was kind of, they all come in one place, all meet in one service, and he just was blown away by the fact that I make money essentially at the end of the day teaching youth about Jesus. And so it kind of broke me as a person. And I said, man, if we are not feeding them everything we possibly can, then I'm missing truly my call from God. And so at that point, I had to reassess how we did everything. And so I think that as we see these new things that are coming out, these new things that we hear, the new normals that we're here and talk about, I think we can look at this point, 8 months out of the first, signs of COVID. I think we can look at how life in general has changed. And so then we have to take a full-on approach of how is it going to change our churches? How are we going to reassess things? And in all of this, the scariest thing to me has been that maybe we've rushed God a little bit in this, or not rushed God, but missed the purpose of this. When all this went down, we immediately were trying everything we could to get back into our buildings. If you think about it, that was our talk. Oh no, are we going to have to cancel Sunday service this week? Oh no, it looks like this next week, because of everything, our youth services are out, our kids services are out. And then it went months after months, weeks after weeks, and we realized that we're not getting back in our churches. Yet that was our sole focus, if you will. My question is, maybe have we missed the timing on this? Maybe if, I believe God's hands is in all of this still. Not that he sent COVID to us, but I think he was, he's very aware of it. And so I almost ask ourselves, is this the time that we have to question how we're doing things? Is this the time that we have to understand that new things in ministry are changing? So you ask me what I think ministry will be about in 5 years. I think it's going to be about what it needs to be about now, and what it has been, the focus has been on, which I think is fully relational. If we aren't building those relationships and we don't have them built, I'm afraid we're going to miss out on this generation. Why do you say that? They're not going to come back into our churches. If we are expecting every, we've talked about it on this call already. If we're expecting every church member that we had to come back into our building, we're missing it. It's probably not going to happen. There's a good chance during all of this that some of them stepped away, and they've probably stepped away for good, unfortunately. So then we have to say, how do we readdress it? How do we reassess the fact that kids aren't coming back in our buildings? And if that's the reality, we have to understand that church itself has changed. And so in 5 years, what does it look like? I just, in my opinion, it's going to have to be 100% relationally based. If there's no way for you to make relationships, outside of your four walls, I think we're going to really, really struggle. I don't have the answers to where we go from here. I just really want to encourage us, during this time, stay connected. Do everything you possibly can. If you've got kids back in your building, praise the Lord. That's great. Let's celebrate them. Let's stay connected. Let's make them feel appreciated. Let's make them feel that love. But if there's those ones that maybe haven't made it back, understand that there may be a chance that there's nothing that we can do that will get them back. That doesn't mean, and I've always felt this, that when kids leave our ministries, that doesn't mean it's time for us to cut them off and say, well, they left our ministries and they've left us, so I'm done with them. No, I think there still has to be a way outside of our walls where we forget about us for a minute and say, whether they're a part of this physical ministry or not, God's put them in our life and connected them with us at some point that we may have to go further. So if those kids that we felt so close to and so dear to are maybe not coming back to our buildings, we can't forget about them. We have to think, how can we stay connected? Maybe it's phone calls. Maybe it's text. Maybe it's just being present when you can be. I hate to say this, maybe it is us getting outside of the four walls of the church. Maybe it is us going to them. Maybe just maybe, God is asking us to look how Jesus did ministry and say, man, he went to them. He was around them. He put himself in situations that people would even say, is he even supposed to be where he is right now? That's how Jesus did ministry. He spoke to them in their terms. He spoke in parables. He got on their level. It wasn't something up here for them. It was, how can I get what they need to know to them, and how will they understand it? And I just, I don't have the answers for how it's changing. I just feel like there's that moment that God is saying, hey, it needs to change. And maybe that's where we're at right now. Maybe that's, maybe it's not the rush back into the building. Maybe it's what if there was no building? How would we approach ministry at that point? And I think those are, things you may need to ask your staff, ask yourself, ask your pastors. If there was no building, because that could be where we're going. California, I know you guys are, they're not letting you back in your buildings. And I mean, we're hearing more and more of this stuff. What would ministry be if you don't have your buildings? That's the tough questions we got to ask, So I kind of circled around all of that, but, hopefully there's some in there you can pull from.
No, I think I think that that's good. And David, would you like to add anything to that? Where do you see our ministries in 5 years?
I think you're asking the wrong guy. You're talking to someone who bought his pastoral staff 2020 Christian planners back in January at 25 bucks a pop. The worst investment of my life. Hey, dude, by mid-March, I just collected them. We're gonna throw them in the tire bin and we're just gonna burn this stuff. But I'm a trillion% with Josh. I've been screaming that out here in California from the rooftops. Uh, California is no friend of the church. And I don't know how things work in Pennsylvania, but I agree. I'm not saying God sent COVID-19, but I believe God's certainly using it. And I think he's really given us an opportunity to take ministry outside the building. Because again, teenagers aren't just showing up at youth group just to see what's going on. We've got to go where they are. It's scriptural in the book of Acts. We all want Acts chapter 2. We want to get down and have a hoedown and have all of that. But once they were baptized in the Holy Spirit, it says they just stayed in Jerusalem and they go to synagogue. They stayed in the building. And geez, God was so irritated with it that he just inspired some Roman spears to poke him in the back of the head and drove him out of the church building, which was sacred to them. And I'm in my church building right now. I love this sanctuary. It's essential. Our gatherings are meaningful. But God, in the book of Acts, after the pouring out the Holy Spirit upon our sons and our daughters, and is that not the goal for every one of us in youth ministry, that God would pour out his Spirit on our sons and on our daughters? But he did that we would then get out of the sacred building, the sacred cow that we're in, and go to where they are, because they are in the harvest, they are in the community, they're at the football games, the basketball games, the shaky pizzas. I think ministry, we are always going to have a home base, but I think we've got to find ways to engage our community in the community, because the days of them coming to church just to check it out, that ship sailed a long time ago.
No, I love what you both are saying, and I agree wholeheartedly. And as you guys were speaking, I wrote down on this little note, and you won't be able to read it, but I'll tell you what it says. I'm not saying that it's revelation or not, but it meant something to me. That I think that we've made a mistake in thinking that what has happened to the church during the pandemic, that the church has become collateral damage. I don't think that it's collateral damage. I think that we need to view it as collateral advantage. And that brings us to, a place where, for years we have needed to shift our focus. And I think that for years it's been like we've been trying to move the Titanic. It takes a lot to move that big ship, unless there's a major force that forces it to move quicker, more quickly. And I think that COVID has forced that upon the church. That it has blessed me so much that just in the past 8 months, to see some of our pastors, some of them are in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, okay? They're still pastoring, and they love pastoring, and they're doing a good job, but they've never had an online presence. They've never been on social media. And so I love seeing when I get an invitation to follow someone on social media that, they're 70 years old and they're just now on Instagram. Or, we're seeing that, that they're doing online church. They've never done that before. They never had to. But they've been forced to do that. And I think that's a good thing. And I agree with what you both have said, that it's important for us to know that that we have to shift, we have to change, we've got to relaunch. For some of us, we've got to rebrand. There's some people, some churches, some student ministry, some children's ministry, you've had the same logo, if you've had a logo at all, for 20 years. And you're just now realizing, okay, if we're going to do social media, if we're going to have an online presence, there has to be a brand that is attached to us. We do that all the time. People don't realize how important brands are. So I'm just going to add this into closing that that branding is important. That's where I see ministries going in the next 5 years, is understanding the importance of branding. I mean, you think about this. When I see, I don't think I have one here with me. No, but whenever I see a certain brand of coffee's logo, um, I can smell it. My senses recognize that. When my kids were younger and they would see the Golden Arches, that food's not good. It doesn't taste awesome at all, but they always wanted it because they had associated this brand or their music with those dumb toys that they would get as kids. They didn't necessarily like the burger or the nuggets. I mean, the fries are amazing if you can eat them in the first 5 minutes that you get them. After that, who knows? But there was an association to something that they wanted. What if through our branding, what if people begin to understand that when they see that brand of whatever ministry you're in charge of, that that's a place where people can meet Christ, that that's a place where people can be healed of sickness, that that's a place where people can be delivered from demons, from sins, from, you know, this is the place where lives are changed. What if that's what your brand became known as? Well, if you don't have a brand, you can't be noticed for that. And so I think that's one of the things that I see happening in the next several years, is people understanding the importance of that. And so I know that we could talk about this stuff for a long time. I want to be sensitive to your time. I want to be sensitive to those that are watching us live right now. I do want to say thank you to David White and to Justin Sharpe for joining us for our PYLA conference. You guys have been a great blessing. You've given us a lot to think about. And so if you would like to dialogue a little more about this at the conclusion of this session, we're going to put a screen up that's going to give you the logins to be able to join us for a Zoom call, in a Zoom room. If you want to join us for the next 15 minutes or so, we'd love to take some questions. The youth board and I will be on there, and we'd love to spend some time with you. So I appreciate you. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being a part of what we're doing. And thanks for investing in Pennsylvania. See you guys in a few moments.